Okay. Welcome everyone. My name is Megha Sanjay and I'm on the Arts in US team. This is Conversations with an Artist, a series by our organization where we discuss various aspects of the artistic journey with leading Indian classical artists in the United States. For those of you who are new to our community, Arts in the US provides emerging Indian classical artists in the United States with the tools and network to continue their learning, create new work, and showcase these art forms within and outside the Indian diaspora. Today, we're speaking with Arun Ramamurthy, an exceptional Carnatic violinist, composer, and educator. I'd like to introduce our executive director, Vani Krishnamurthy, who will be conducting the interview.
Thanks so much, Megha. I'm super excited to be here with Arun. I think we go back about 15 years or so when I first discovered his music in a little cafe in the West Village and was just enthralled by his work. So I'm come a little full circle here where he's actually speaking to me as in the arts world versus as an audience member, and I'm excited to share with you as I learn myself a little bit more about Arun and how he approaches his work. So Arun, if you can trace your journey in becoming a violinist for us, what were the various triggers and turning points that led you to where you are today?
Sure, and thank you, Vani and Mega, for doing this. Um, yeah, I grew up in New Jersey, in the United States. I grew up in Marlborough, New Jersey, which had a pretty decent Indian community. Um, my mother is a Carnatic vocalist, so she used to actually sing quite often for Bharatanatyam dancers, and toured and did a lot of things before I was born. I'm the youngest of three, so by the time I was born, my mom had her hands full. So she didn't tour as much and perform as much, but she taught like a lot. So there were a lot of students coming to my house when I was 5 and 6 years old, and they were all learning Carnatic vocal. Um, and so I started learning Carnatic vocal at that time. Also, all the Sarali Varase, the Dhatu Varase, all that stuff, all the basics I did vocally at the beginning. And, my grandmother, my mother's mother, she played violin. And she didn't play professionally, but she had a real love for it. And every time she would come and visit us, she had her violin with her. When I'd visit them in India, um, I would see her play. So there was already some sort of connection and affinity for the violin in my family. But my parents had I think they made a very smart choice when they started me on violin. It wasn't with Carnatic music, but it was with Western classical. So I started when I was 8. I started with Western classical music with a violinist named Jim Mate, Mr. Mate, and his wife, Virginia Mate, Mrs. Mate. They both taught at a music school, right, in my town. So I started playing Western classical violin, playing up, standing up, the whole thing. And for 2 years, I did that before I ever started playing Carnatic violin. By the time I was 10, I started learning Carnatic violin with Sri Ananta Krishnan, who is, an outstanding violinist. And really, I would say I was extremely fortunate to have such a wonderful violinist that lived in New Jersey a half an hour from my parents' house. Um, I think it's rare to have that, and I was very fortunate to have it. And he didn't teach too many students, so I was also lucky to be one of them and to just get the opportunity to learn with him. And I think because I played Western classical music for so long, or for the couple of years before that, I hit the ground running in Carnatic music. So, and I had already sung vocally the Geetams, Lambodara, all these things were already inside. So by the time I went to him, it was like we breezed through the other Geetams and then went straight into Varnams. And he gave me everything. He gave me everything that I needed, from the point of like really understanding the aesthetic of Carnatic music, through Manodharma, through learning improvisation, learning how to think on my own feet. Um, Not my feet, I guess we're sitting all the time. He really gave me everything that I needed to know. And so I would say that one, the blessing of having Anant Krishna uncle as a guru in New Jersey at a time when I was like kind of ripe for it um, was amazing. The background that I had in Western classical music, because I actually studied Western classical music simultaneously. So I kept learning Western classical music until I was 17, almost 16 or 17. And I played in the New Jersey State Youth Orchestra. Um, so I was kind of like pushing it on Western classical music as well. And I was performing like, the Simana, Yagaraja Day, all these kind of things. I was performing and participating. I did the competitions, all that stuff. Um, I did it for years and I was doing kind of both side by side. And yeah, at some point I made a choice to kind of focus on Carnatic music. So that was a very big decision.
Was
To
there a
do.
particular um, moment that made you choose Carnatic over Western?
Yeah, I think I remember a moment. There was I was probably 16, and I was playing in the New Jersey State Youth Orchestra. And while I absolutely loved being playing in an orchestra with, you know, 40 other people, like you can't match the sound of a big orchestra. It's profound, especially when you're in it, right? Like the audience is one thing, but when you're in it, you hear everything. It's there. It's beautiful. But at the same time, I used to have, you have to, all the string players have to have their bows moving in the same direction so that it has to look like good. If everyone's going in different directions, it looks like chaos. And I just had the hardest time keeping my bow in the right direction, right? I just couldn't do it. And I think it frustrated me. So I think that was just something that got to me. And then I remember being with Ananta Krishnanko and we were doing Kalyani Kamboji. And it was like we were talking about like how do we think about music? How do we like relax our heart rate so we can really be open? And how do we create ideas based on one singular idea? How do you create an entire sentence and then an entire paragraph? And then with that paragraph, how do you create an entire statement that you want to say? All those things is what we were talking about in my Carnatic music classes. And I was very drawn into that. So that was around the time that I think I said, okay, I'm gonna stick. I think I'm gonna keep going with Carnatic music. And when you get that age, it's also you have a lot going on with school, all these other things. So I did have to make a choice at that point. I'm pretty happy.
Yeah, it seems like it turned out to be the right one. Um, and so were there any other tensions that you faced between kind of doing both at the same time?
At that time in my teenage years, I no, I didn't have any real tensions. Um, it's interesting because the instrument is tuned differently, quite differently. So, for example, the middle strings, the two middle strings, there's a different relationship between them. In it's D and A on a Western tuned violin, which is a fifth. D, sa, and fa. D is sa. It's a fifth apart. But then
Okay.
on a Western, on an Indian tuned violin, it would be A and D, which actually would be a fourth. So there's something about, so meaning the fingers just change. If I'm going to go from my third string to the second string, um, the way you would go between them would be different in Carnatic music and Western music. So it's very easy to get confused. And I know this because now I teach a lot of Western classical violinists,
Oh,
professional violinists that have been playing their instrument for 30 years, and they still stumble over that because they're so used to doing one thing, right? And then when you change it. But what's amazing is as a child, it's very easy to separate things.
huh.
And I thought of them as two different instruments in a way. Even though it was a violin, it felt very different in my hands. And the posture of sitting, and there's a number of reasons where it does feel different. And so I didn't have any issues in that sense. So for me, honestly, it felt pretty fluid, the two things as far as, and they felt like different trajectories.
And so you became a full-time artist at what point, and what was the trigger that kind of made you switch from being kind of a part-time artist to a full-time
Yeah, after college, I came back to New Jersey and, didn't know exactly the career path that I wanted to take. I had ideas, but I was like, okay, I also wanted to see more about this music thing that was, with me my whole life. So I ended up going to India. I went to Mysore. I lived with Mysore Nagaraj, Mysore Manjunath in their home with their father, and I lived with them for a year and got some really serious training there. Um, but when I came back, I ended up getting a 9 to 5 job. I ended up working in software, and I worked for a few years in New York City here. And but I was still like performing, and since I was coming into New York City so much, I was connecting with some of the South Asian artists that were here. And most of them in the very beginning, it was like Bharatanatyam dancers and Mridangist and Balaskandan. So people that were kind of in the world that I was in musically. Um, and but then over time, as I kept performing and playing in New York while I was working, I was meeting a lot of artists that were coming from different places. It was opening me up artistically because New York City is just filled with not only talented musicians, but extremely curious musicians, open minded artists that are ready to collaborate and ready to understand you if you're ready to understand them. And I was kind of intoxicated by that too. So I worked for a while, and then I ended up leaving my job and working and going full time into music. Um, and then right before I got married, I ended up going back to work, and I worked again for a couple of years, uh, only to then pursue music one more time.
Mm.
And since then, I haven't looked back, and that's been almost 12 years now that I've been doing music.
Amazing. Thank you for outlining that. It's just a fantastic journey to hear, just even from a child and sort of going through the kind of daily um, hassles of learning something and training in it, and then kind of decisions, major decisions you're making later as an adult, and how all of that was impacted there. So speaking of, exposure in New York City, you engage with many different artistic spaces, um, performing, composing, teaching, collaborating. Is there one that you prefer? And if so, how do you still approach the others with some artistic integrity? With all of the artistic integrity that you do, that I know you do, approach them.
So is there one that I prefer?
So one of those spaces that you
Yeah. Uh,
enjoy more.
they're all they're in a way they're very different. I love to perform. Um, if you asked me if I had one day left and what would I do with it, I mean, it would be to play with other musicians. I think to put it out there, that's the number one um, goal or purpose to me of making music. It's for your own salvation, your own peace and happiness, but it's also about connection with other people.
Sure.
So I think playing with other people is so performing would be the thing that I would choose over anything else. And collaborating, but collaborating doesn't necessarily have to mean it's a cross genre thing or anything. It
Sure.
could just, I could collaborate with the kind of vocals I did today, and we things, and so there's a lot of uh, yeah. I would say performing is the primary thing, and the second part of the question.
Well, just that then, if performing is what you most prefer, how do you approach the other spaces with artistic integrity, as much artistic integrity as you do?
The other spaces, meaning like the composing space.
The composing, the teaching, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, what does artistic integrity?
I guess it sort of means that, you know, you're putting so much of your passion into the thing that you prefer,
Yeah,
right? And then is it somewhat of, you know, there's some sense of obligation, obligatory, like, I don't love this as much as what I'm doing, but it's something that I must do. But then it takes you putting in that 150%,
yeah,
to actually then have it all come together as one, I guess.
yeah. I mean, to me, artistic integrity, it's it's all based on the relationship between your soul and your instrument,
Right.
right? Like the connection that you have. So I feel that my art has integrity if I believe in it and if it came from within me. And I feel if I feel proud of it, I feel it was authentic to who I am and what I want to put out in the world, then I think it's perfect. And in a way, it's like, that's that's something, took me some time to understand about myself and about what art is in the first place, what its intention is supposed to be, and how artists um, and their trust of themselves and their belief in themselves and their fearlessness to kind of look in and just put out what they have on the inside is how that is at the core of what art is.
Yeah.
So, I think if as long as I'm staying true to that, then I'm proud of everything I do.
Yeah.
And it
Sure.
might not be the best work, but that's okay. You're not going to be the best at everything all the time. Um, but if you ask me, if you honor the process of making art, and if you honor like yourself in that and what really matters to you, then you're doing the right.
That makes sense. I can imagine that there's just so much courage that goes into what you're saying, right? I mean, just like what you're saying to sort of share and put out there what you feel good about, without, fear, like you're
Yeah.
saying.
And it's not easy. I mean, I admire songwriters that write about the traumas in their life. And the beauty is that there's somebody else on the planet that probably relates to it and that was moved by it and that it helped.
Yeah.
So it is very, it's not for nothing. I mean, I think the songwriter that writes a song about something that happened to them, I think they receive some sort of personal therapy. I think they feel better by getting things out, but I think they also help some of the people around them. And so it's a very difficult thing, I think, to actually go there and put it out there. Uh, but I think that's part of it. I think that's part, and I think you have to get to that point. But I think as far as like creation and composing and improvising and kind of putting everything together to make this I don't want to call it a product. It's not a product, but this piece of work, right? That means something, that feels holistic, that feels like a full picture of you. That takes a lot of years of working on, developing your craft. Like technically, if you're a dancer, if you're a percussionist, whatever, you have to work on your craft. You have to get your chops out, right? You gotta practice so that when the time comes, you can execute the thing that you're thinking, right?
Right.
Um, so things like practice and really shedding and working hard on your craft is essential to then being able to let go of the practice and be creative. And then you can be creative, and then when you're start composing or writing or working on trying to put something together, you just are coming from a place of more control and
Sure.
knowledge.
There's so much depth that you've already sort of settled yourself into with your work that it's not that it's coming from a place of comfort at that moment, I'm sure.
yeah, sometimes comfort, sometimes discomfort, and all that. But it's coming from a place of like, yeah, I know what this is. I've done this before. I've been there, and you know how it is. Like when you drive somewhere once, the first time you don't know where you're going. You're very hesitant. You go twice, then you're a little bit better. The third time, it's like you could drive a little faster. You can turn the radio a little louder because you know where you're going now.
Sure.
So it's very similar, I think, with art forms that the more you do something, the more comfortable you get with it, and then you can like let go and kind of zoom out, and then look at what you're doing. You can be very like observant of your surroundings, um, because you're more like on auto.
No, that makes sense. That makes sense. Um, so, we followed your journey, and you always have so many things in the works creatively. It feels like a lot going on at any given moment. Is there ever a tension between these creative projects and ideas that you're working on, where either you're trying to keep them separate or you're okay with them blending? Has that ever happened?
Yeah, depends on how, like, I think logistically speaking, um, yes, that happens all the time. Meaning, like, I might have a project that I'm working on with Arabic musicians. Maybe let's just say it's next week, and then at the same time, but then this week, at the end of the week, I'm doing um, a thing with the Cuban, the Afro-Cuban group. So, like, the music is very different, right? So, like, the music that I have to learn for the Arabic music has microtones. It has half flats. So the pitch of the re one is not re one. It's between re one and re two, but it's a very specific pitch. So you have to like really practice that, and that doesn't exist in Carnatic music. It doesn't exist. So it's a skill and a thing that I would have to specifically work on for this music.
Sure.
Um, so that requires time. It requires you to be focused on that particular aspect of your playing when you sit down to do that. So, you know, organizing yourself is very important, like your practice sessions.
I guess what I mean is if you're talking about this particular note, right? Um, and then, if you're collaborating also with another artist, do you then ever do you try and keep the two artistically different? Or do you say, oh, you know what, we experimented with something here. I think this would be cool here too, right? Like, and when you have a number of different projects going on, are you one of those artists that kind of allows things to blend and sort of influence each other? Or are you sort of like, no, 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 this is my this project and this is my that?
Yeah, I think I used to be more about keeping things separate, um, until I realized that you can't keep things separate. That there's only one me. And it's funny because I just put out an album called New Moon, my trio, and I wrote liner notes, and it's about this exact idea, this topic, that there's only one you, there's only one me, right? So to actually separate things, um, can be hard, and it could also kind of be detrimental in a way if you're focused on like certain artistic attributes and suppressing them at certain times or letting them rise at certain times. Um, I like to, I try to just let everything come in organically, and I will let it come out as it will. You know what I mean? In a way, like, because improvised music is such that it's about a mindset, it's about a mental space that you're in. So like when you're improvising, if you're open and you're just like letting the sounds of the people that you're playing with enter you, and then whatever comes out. Then sometimes, yeah, that half flat, that makam half flat, may show itself if there's a certain phrase that reminded me of that thing, you know. And I don't, so I do not stop that. I'll let that come in. Because if it came to me in that moment, it came to me in that moment because the moment called for it. And that's why it jogged my memory. So it would fit. It would be fine.
Yeah. And that's like kind of an organic,
Yeah.
it's coming about organically, actually, informed by your experiences, and that's what makes sense. So yeah.
And that's what makes collaboration real. Like it's all you have to really authentically get into the space of the other music. And you have to let it into you, right? You have to take it in with full respect and reverence for that art form, and then study it, understand it, get to know the stories behind the songs and behind the artists, where they come, what's their story,
Sure.
what's their history. Because I mean, right? So much of Carnatic music and it has a history, it has a background, and we want people to know that because it's not just about music, it's about culture and music, and all those things come together. So the same goes for every art form that's out there,
Sure.
right? Like, um, I play with this kora player who's incredible, Yakuba Sissoko. So, and he's telling, and he plays the kora from Mali. He's from Mali, West Africa. And he is brilliant. And he plays these incredible pieces. And then he tells me the stories of the pieces and where they come from. And that gives me as much information in a way as the song itself.
Mm.
Because then okay, well, this is where he's coming from. This is what, the generations of his family before, that's what they were doing when the song was created.
Sure.
And that's important for me to know. That way, when I'm playing, I'm like, okay, I can try at least to think about those things. So if I think about those things, then I'm sort of like mentally and spiritually trying to connect to something that he's connecting with.
Right.
And as long as we're trying, in like with real, authentic effort and care, I think you can things can seep into your playing, and it'll feel organic.
Yeah. No, that um sorry, I actually accidentally muted myself. So going deep into collaboration, how do you approach blending Carnatic music with other genres like jazz or blues? Specifically, this is sort of the age-old question, but what steps do you take, or maybe don't take, to maintain the integrity of Carnatic music while introducing elements of other styles?
It's an interesting question, because sometimes it's very deliberate. I mean, often my first response to hearing something or working with somebody is to fall back on my roots, which is Carnatic music. So then the first thing I'll do is like, is there a raga for this? What tala is this? Right? And I'll definitely do that. And the thing is a lot of times, a raga like darbari. Okay, let's just say darbari. Darbari is the same as the natural minor scale. So there's going to be songs that are in the natural minor scale from traditions around the world. But darbari doesn't work because darbari has very specific movements. So gamarisa. So it has to move in that direction,
Mm.
right? Whereas, and that has a feel, that has a certain thing. So does darbari work with something that's in the natural minor? It could, but it might not. So, I might then be like, okay, natural minor is like Natabairavi. So, okay, Natabairavi. But then Natabairavi has certain gamakas, right? Sa, ri, ga, right? That gamaka of ga, that doesn't exist anywhere in the world, right? Like it's Carnatic music. Um, so that a traditional Natabairavi wouldn't work necessarily. It can work, but it doesn't always with a song that's in the natural minor, like a non-Carnatic song that's in natural minor. So So you have to make choices there. So for me, it's like, okay, I I might, and at that point, I would say, okay, I'm not playing Natchabairavi, and I am playing the natural minor, which is the same root notes as Natchabairavi, but I'm approaching it from a different way. But some of the gamakas that exist in Natchabairavi, I'm going to do. Some of them I'm not,
Mm.
and and those are like in the moment choices. Um, and so and I personally, like, what I like to do is to kind of really keep myself open and you know not necessarily stick to a raga. So then it's like, okay, I'm not even going to think about a raga necessarily, because one, jazz, and I mean all kinds of music outside of Indian classical music moves through chord changes. So when the chords change and the backgrounds change and the bass is moving, you might not be able to stay in the same way because things change. So you
Mm.
have to be ready to move and listen and use your ears and just go with instinct. Um, so yeah, I do sometimes really open up and just sort of like listen, and I know the neck of the instrument so well at this point that I'm able to go between different keys. I can hear the keys and know, if it's going to 1 4 5, chord progression, I can play through that pretty easily now and know how I can get through it in a way that kind of brings out some Carnatic flavor, but also brings out other flavors. So, I mean, it takes time. It took me a long time to kind of develop any kind of fluency, and I will be developing a fluency. I have not mastered any.
Is
Uh,
this, and then when you're saying all this, is this during kind of when you're composing or more improvising?
this is more improvising. This is more in collaboration when I'm sitting, with people on stage. Composing is more intentional. Composing, like for my trio and with Trina, in my duo with Trina, um, there it's definitely more intentional, and I will often start with a raga. I use a lot of like rhythmic ideas from Carnatic music. Rhythmic ideas are, I mean, Carnatic rhythm is so beautiful and elegant, sophisticated. There's so much you can do, um, really, with math, and then translate that into uh, beautiful melodies, and it works beautifully for bass lines. As something where you can just think of an aditalam figure and have a little mini corvée, and that could become bass line, and you make the bass player do that, and it's like some ostinato that gets repeated, and all of a sudden you have this very cool, driving, moving, rolling bass line
Yeah.
that's rooted in a Carnatic rhythm. So that if I'm playing on top of that, I could start dropping other sort of Carnatic rhythms in a raga, and then everything just sort of like coalesces. And um, so when I'm composing, I am thinking that actually very often, very intentionally. But I always try to find ways to make it feel a little bit different. And honestly, that's the thing is with playing with bass players or guitarists or pianists, any chordal instrument, you can change the color of a raga just by having the bass move from the sa to some other note,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I mean, Kalyani from D sounds a certain way. So if the bass is droning on D, if you have the shruti on D, and you play and your violin is tuned to D, and you play Kalyani, it sounds like Kalyani. Now take the shruti box and put it in B, and play the same D Kalyani. That's going to sound so different. It's going to be very minor. It's more like Karaharpiya. So it becomes more of a Dorian, like minor thing. And has a completely different feel just by its one note, boom, changing.
Right.
Yeah. So, there's a lot of ways you can just flip something on its head.
And you probably have more freedom to do that in these circumstances as well.
Yeah. 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 And you
Um,
can, yeah.
you're speaking of ways where things kind of are are really cohesive when you're, collaborating with other genres or working with other genres. Are there ever sort of moments where, there are barriers technically or philosophically where like, oh, when I work with a, in jazz or blues, I just don't do this. I know this is one thing that I can't take from Carnatic music and put in there. This just doesn't work.
There's nothing, no, there's nothing I would say I won't do this, that I'm against it. I don't think, I can't think of anything off the top of my head that I would ever say that to in the world of music.
You're open to exploring still.
I'm open to exploring. There are things I cannot do.
Yeah.
There's lots that I cannot do, and I might say no to because if I tried to do it and I hadn't worked on it enough, it wouldn't sound
Yeah.
good. So I'm hesitant to maybe cross that bridge. But I'm, for the most part, I would say I'm pretty open. Um, and I try to put myself in places where I feel I will succeed and
Mhm.
that I feel I will enjoy.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's also important to kind of really think about, and this is something that I've also learned over the years, but to think about what this situation or this project is going to feel like.
Mhm.
And once you're in it, really think about, well, what does this mean? Who am I working with? What am I going to be asked to do? Um, and try to imagine where you're going to be in a month or in 2 weeks, and whether that's where you want to be. And everybody, it's different, and I think everyone at different stages are at different stages in their careers, in their path, their journey. So what you might not be ready for today, in a year you might be, um, but that's okay. Today you don't have to do it,
Sure.
and I think really kind of understanding yourself and honoring that, that's totally fine. But um, for me, yeah, I think now I feel pretty open and willing to try a lot of things. uh, I, through a lot of the Brooklyn Raga Massive collaborations, I mean, I feel like there was a 5 to 6 year span where I feel like every week I was playing with a different genre of music. And, but I would say that it was a lot sometimes. It was a
Yeah.
lot to kind of be bouncing around so much.
Right.
And um, so I did feel like I wasn't grounded, so then what I would do is, honestly, I would practice Carnatic music. I would come and just like, okay, I need something to just like hold me down.
Right.
And obviously Carnatic music is what holds me down. So I would do that, but then it was a lot of, yeah, it was a lot of, and I made changes in my life though. I made conscious decisions to say, you know what, I'm not going to take everything. I'm going to be more selective
Sure.
about what I do, don't do. And those were based on exactly what I'm saying about things where, am I going to enjoy this? Am I going to feel comfortable? Am I going to be doing things that I really want to be doing, that are going to be pushing me in directions that I want to go? Um, all good questions, important questions to ask yourself.
Um, just in that same way, where you make these conscious decisions about projects to choose, are there any sort of conscious things you do to, you know, keep up your creative momentum versus sort of getting and sort of avoiding stagnation at times? Or is it just sort of go with the flow, like an acceptance of, well, right now I'm in this place where things are a little bit flat, but that will pop up at some point.
Yeah, no, things like learning new songs, or I mean, if that's a Carnatic sense, that's one way. But then also, if it's um, a jazz song, if it's Miles Davis solo, and it's just like, okay, well, maybe and I don't do enough of it, but it's something that I've done, and it's something that honestly people in the jazz world, that's what they do in order to get themselves right, to keep themselves fresh, and also to just you put yourselves in somebody else's shoes, like put yourself in a legend's shoes, and
Sure.
then once you start playing what they played, you see it from the inside, and when you see something from the inside and your body's doing it already, then you have a deeper understanding of it, and that helps you change your own perspective on your instrument, which I think is really great. Um, I listen to a lot of music. I listen to a lot of different kinds of music. uh, that helps keep me fresh. So I will, because there's like a constant soundtrack in my life, and it's always changing.
And
So I,
inspiration. Yeah.
yeah, I feel like that is a big part of how I stay fresh, or if I feel like things are getting stale, I will make like a big shift in what I'm listening to,
Sure.
and just let that take me where it's.
Yeah, that's great. Um, so starting to wrap up a little bit, looking at your body of work, do you see a common thread that sort of ties everything together? Um, or do you think that one day you will?
Hmm. I don't know. I mean, I would guess that other people might see something that ties it all together. I don't think about that.
Yeah.
I don't think about any particular thing that is, this is my sound. I think every time I start something new, I just try to be as fresh as I can be and then go. And I think, yeah, if you look back at everything, I'm sure there are certain threads. And everybody has a way of doing things. Everyone has a sound or a look, right? Like certain dance, like a dancer, an individual dancer will have a way that he or she moves.
Yep.
It's just who they are. I sound the way I sound. It's just the way
Sure.
it is. I will never be able to change that. And the way I compose. So like, but I think there are eras. It's interesting. You look at prolific writers and composers, and if you look at the stuff they wrote 20 years ago and the stuff they write today, there'll be a difference.
Right.
But it still sounds like them, you know? So I think because you can't get away from that. I mean, I think, like I have tendencies, and like anybody else, I have tendencies when I compose. The stuff that I write with Trina in my duo, and the stuff I write with my trio, I mean, I think about very different things. Like
Mm.
with Trina, which is two violins, I'm thinking chamber music. I'm thinking string quartet. But I'm thinking Braga, right? I mean, obviously I'm thinking Braga, but I'm thinking chamber vibe, Western classical, but also sort of experimentation, free improv, sort of experimental music. That's where my head is at when I'm trying to compose for us. When I'm thinking about the trio, I'm thinking about jazz. I'm thinking about like, you know, really kind of grooves and things that are like energetic and moving. So they're different things. But then if you listen to the music, I think there's things that are common
Right.
in both, like little motifs or little lines that I write and bass lines that I compose that are similar, right? And I think that's just maybe, and I don't know how to say it in words, but it's just that's my thing.
Right.
So that will be a thread, and I would say that that's a thread because, and there's similarities there because whenever I compose, I try to be as open and authentic as I can. And if you try to be as open and authentic as you can, yourself, you will shine through.
Yeah.
So there will be a thread.
Can't hold that back. Yeah.
Yeah. So
And then at the same point, there's probably different phases in which that thread changes.
right,
Um,
because we're all evolving. I hope we're evolving, and that I mean we should evolve, and we should, and by staying open and being curious, um, and exploring, you will evolve.
um, so what advice would you give to emerging artists who are trying to navigate multiple creative interests, all related, like you? And, is there a time and place to do that? Is it sort of something you wait to do? Is it something that you can do whenever you please? How, anything that you've learned from sort of traversing these different creative genres and interests that you have that you might want to pass on to emerging artists?
Yeah. Um, I mean, a lot of what I have been saying about staying open being curious, um, all of that. Uh, I think first is practice your craft. Never stop practicing forever. Like play your instrument, dance, sing, um, exercises, do practice that stuff. Get like because your facility on your instrument is the pathway to all the creativity you want, right? And I know creativity and being, all of that is sort of the goal. I think a lot of artists want that. Uh, so in order to get there, the more facility we have, the more ability we have to do things on our instruments, it directly leads to creativity. And as you get older, you will absorb more and more. So like not only will you should be proactively listening to music, watching dancers, going to see them live, be a part of the scene, because there's nothing like seeing music and dance live. It's very different than watching a video. Like get out of your house, put your phone away, and go sit in a room with other people doing it because energy is a real thing. And like being in the room with the dancer or with the musician is going to speak to you much more if you're there. So that's why it's definitely go and be out, be on the scene, meet people, talk to people, see them perform, practice your crafts, your exercises, do that without fail. Keep improving on your instrument, and stay curious. Like I mean, you asked something about is there a right time to do it? Is there a wrong time to do it? And that's tricky. I don't know. And I think it's for everybody. It might be a little bit different. I have a lot of students. I have many of my students, like I was saying, are professional violinists. They're amazing. I'm like, wow, you're killing that instrument. It's amazing. But then they're learning Carnatic music, and that's very different for them. And people want to improvise, and I'm just like, I don't think we can do that yet. I think like I get that you can play all this stuff, and I play a phrase for them, they play it right back to me, and it's amazing. But it's like I think there's a certain understanding of the aesthetic of the music that needs to happen first. So I suggest they listen to music. I suggest they keep playing, but then really, okay, now listen to MS Subbulakshmi sing Kalyani. Now listen to Lalgudi play it, like because you have to get the aesthetic. It has to like seep in and be part of you. So I think it takes time to really go there, but um, I think it's okay to try and experiment in your own house, in your practice sessions,
Sure.
to go for it. You know, um, don't be a tough critic of yourself. Like it's okay to try, and we're all here to make mistakes. So you know, um, really really go for it. Try new things. Um, and also, I would say even if you want to do like traditional Carnatic music or traditional anything, and you just want to stay in that lane, it's still beneficial to like listen to other styles. Even then, it's still beneficial because there are beautiful things that are happening around you.
Sure.
And even some of the great Carnatic musicians are influenced by music from around the world. Muthu Swami Dikshitra was influenced by music from other places.
Sure.
And, I just think that's what art is.
Yeah.
So stay open-minded, stay free, and, curious, and keep practicing. I don't know. I guess those are my advice.
Yes, that's great. Yeah, these are living and evolving traditions, and it only makes sense for artists to do the same, right?
Yeah, one thing, I had this funny experience of there's a man named William Parker. William Parker is probably one of the most creative living jazz bass players around. He lives in the East Village. And I was playing a gig in Vermont, and William Parker played the night before, and he left his bass bow at the venue, his bow for his bass. So the guy at the venue was like, "Hey, you live in New York. You're going back to New York right now. would you mind taking William Parker's bow back and give it to him? And I was like, yeah, I'll take William Parker's bow. So I had his bow, and I tried to get in touch with him, and he was like out of town. And finally, a month later, I had his bow for a month. A month later, I went to his house, and he lives, Lower East Side, and I hung out with him for a little while, and it was incredible, like just talking to him. But he said something that was fascinating. He was just like, he's like, the masterpiece. Like when people talk about masterpieces, right? Like Shama Shastri's Marivere, masterpiece. So when like the masterpiece is a living, breathing thing.
Mm.
It's always changing. So even the masterpieces shouldn't be put behind glass in the museum, right?
Sure.
Even the masterpiece, it is a masterpiece because it's always evolving. It's always changing. And through generations of new musicians, it evolves further,
Right.
right? So that is the point of
Yeah.
it. It is supposed to change. We're
And
supposed to change it.
it's relevant. That's fantastic. No, that's a great example and wonderful from somewhat of a different genre to say that, and we can apply that equally well to our Indian classical genres.
100%. It's I have found so many similarities in Carnatic music and jazz, in the music, in spirit, in people, in all of it. It's wild. So that's something and I think it's because I've kind of thrown myself in.
Yeah,
I find that to be so beautiful.
that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing your journey with us, your thoughts on, all the different creative processes that you must go through in any of your works. And it's really interesting to go into the mind of an artist like yours, like you, and understand exactly the types of decisions that you're making consciously, subconsciously, unconsciously. To get to where you are. So we really appreciate you sharing that with us. And
Thank
yeah, and thank you for
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for doing all this. It's great.
absolutely more soon.
Yes.
I think we can